Alrighty, so for this tutorial, we're going to be baking high poly data onto a low poly object. Okay, so first things first, if you're in my class, you can download this file that I'm going to open up, but the one that I'm going to be looking at is a shield. So let me go to my downloads folder real quick. Boom, right here, downloads, and shield low poly UV start. All right, so this is our low poly object. All right, see how few faces it has? It has 904 faces. That divides into 1728 tries, and yeah, you can see all the objects in there. Look at the hierarchy. If you want really solid bakes out of Painter, I implore you to consider trying out these naming conventions, right? See how I have all of my objects underscore low, underscore low, underscore low, and they're all under one group. Now let me import my high poly, okay? So I'm going to navigate to this, and again, if you're in the class, then you have access to this. If you're not, though, you cannot download this shield, but the ideas will still transfer. All right, so see, I have my high poly and my low poly. Notice that they're in the same world space, exact same world space, right? And the thing about that high poly is that it has the same exact names. See, wood underscore high, wood underscore low, metal rims underscore high, metal rims low. And let me just get one of these messed up really quick. Okay, so so that's exactly what we need to bake. And whenever you're going into Painter, you always want to export your low poly, file export selection. And let's just put this, sure, on the desktop for now. Shield for Painter. .fbx. Export an FBX. It's going to be the easiest for Substance to pop open. Okay, so I'm going to go into Substance Painter. And the entire, like, if you've seen any like really visually like photorealistic objects in 3D, be it video games or VFX, then odds are that they've had their maps baked out. Now, what are we talking about maps being baked out? What that means is that we need to somehow get a lower poly object to look like that high poly. So let's set up our file. I'm going to do file new, and I'm going to do a bigger document resolution. If you're going for like super photoreal, the higher res, the better. And I'll just leave it on PBR metallic roughness, and I'm going to select from my desktop that low poly, right? So shield for Painter, boom, that's the low poly. And since I'm going to be rendering in Arnold, I'm going to be doing OpenGL. If you're rendering in Blender, you're going to use OpenGL. If it's Unity, OpenGL. If it's Unreal Engine, you'll be using DirectX. But yeah, so I'm going to do OK there. And this is the guy. All right. So you'll notice right off the bat, this is not performing correctly, right? Like, what's happening here? Look at our UVs. These are our UVs. It has nowhere to paint this data, right? Whenever I'm doing a brush stroke, there's not enough UVs. Like, these UVs aren't spread out enough for those paint strokes to sort of wrap around individually around those objects, okay? So that's the problem that we're encountering there. So we need to go back to Maya and fix some problems, right? There's a reason that I put some issues in here. So first of all, it has no UVs. If I select my stuff, boom. It's just like one basic projection. So first step, I'm going to do planar based. You could also do camera based and go from the top. But if you left click, that's going to be planar from, let's see, what direction is this? X. If you right click, it's going to be from Z. It's projecting from Z, so that's what's happening there. And then if you middle click that button, it projects from above. Boom, there you go. Next up, UV shell. I'm going to do unfold. I'm just going to unfold all these. Now, most of these are looking pretty good. However, this metal rim, it's going to like a circular object like that we could unwrap further. You'll probably want to, right? Because it's going to take up a lot of UV space. It's going to be a problem. So I'm going to do a cut right there. I'm just double clicking this. I'm doing shift right click to open this menu up, doing cut. And then I'm going to go into UV shell mode, shift right click, unfold, and then I'm going to press G to repeat that tool to this one. Boom, there you go. Now we have those shells unfolded, And honestly, everything else is unfolded. Notice how these rivets only have one side to them. So we don't need to unfold those. I mean, we do need to do like the, shift right click unfold, but we don't need to do any cuts because it has like an entirely open bottom. So it's going to unfold nicely for us. Okay. All right. So next up, we're going to go in and select all of these. And what you want to do is you're going to be going to the layout. So if you open this up, if you shift left click it, you can do, you can look at the options for it. And I'm going to uncheck stack similar because I don't want these things to stack up. I want them to all have their own separate data. That just basically stacks anything that's like similar in terms of topology. And then preserves 3D ratios. So these will get scaled. And then we also will give it the option to move the shells around, which is, it needs to, and rotate them. So I'm going to lay those out and give yourself a little bit of padding down there too in these options. Give yourself a little bit of padding, but this is looking pretty good. That looks a little bit weird though, this shell. So let's check out the checkerboard, and I am indeed getting some skewing there. If an object isn't like unwrapping nicely, let's try another unfold on that. Something that you can do is the old style of UV mapping, which is the unfold U, unfold V, to kind of help with that and alleviate that problem. But yeah, there you go, looking pretty good. Let's check the checkerboard now. Not nearly as much warping, right? Perfect, that's what we want. So this guy's ready to be exported, and we can bake on it, right? So file, export selection. If you do a new file for this, like if you call this like shield fixed and export that, then when you go in here, you have to go to project configuration, and then you need to point it to that new object. All right. 1 second, my cat's eating plastic. Not allowed. Cats just love their plastic, don't they? So I'm going to go and forward it to that shield fixed model, right? So I'm going to open that up, keep it OpenGL, do OK. And there we go. Look at that. And Substance Painter has maintained our 3D paint strokes. So that's fantastic for us. And next up, let's start a bake, right? So let's go to bake mesh maps under the mode category. And do us a favor and alt click normal, because you just want to check the normal map, make sure it bakes nicely, right? Next up, I'm going to upgrade this to 1024. We're not doing the full res because when you're baking, it's going to be a constant battle going between Painter and Maya to see what is giving you the problems, right? So next up, let's find our high res that's in my downloads folder, high poly. There we go. Boom. So now it's in the scene. You can see that they're mingling with each other. If you instead see them offset, that's going to be a problem. You're not going to get a good bake. It's going to really provide some problems. Next up, I'm going to leave anti-aliasing off for now, but for your final bake, definitely do as much anti-aliasing as you can. And let's just do bake selected textures. So it's only going to bake out normal map. That's the only one we have checked. And let's see what it looks like. Boom. So it's looking pretty good. Right? We're getting a lot of, ooh, that's not looking too good. What's happening down there, right? So whenever you see a problem on your mesh in terms of normal maps, that means that there's a discrepancy between your high poly and your low poly. Something that's a little bit too much, right? So if I unhide my high poly, everything looks very nice. It's very close to each other. They're hugging all the forms, but the bottom here, you see this bottom? That's gonna create some problems, right? It's not close enough to the high poly. See how we can't see the high poly at all? So rather than like moving the high poly around or something to fit that, I'm just gonna move my low poly a little bit. So I'm gonna go into face mode and just push this up. So I need to unhide this high poly, sorry about that. I'm just gonna go into face mode, double click this and move it upward, and boom. So now it's intersecting with that. Now we could have probably fixed this with rear ray distance in Painter. In the bake mesh maps, like you can change how far those rays shoot when they're scanning that model. But now that I fixed it, Let's also check. Yeah, there's a little bit of a gap in that metal rim. So I'm gonna click this metal rim, and let's turn off the checkerboard. And I'm just gonna fit that up. See how I'm just kind of welding that gap together almost, you know. They are separate objects, you know, so it's not too big of a deal. But yeah, I just don't want that nasty little seam in there. Okay, so next up, I'm going to File, Export. I should probably unfold some of these actually. So let's go back into UV Shell. I'm gonna unfold U on this, simply because whenever if we tweaked those points in 3D space, that's kind of elongating certain parts of them, so it needs to unfold nicely again. And let's do object mode, and I'm just gonna select this group and File, Export, Selection. Let's do Shield Fixed on the desktop. And since I just overwrote the existing good file, what I can do is Edit, Re-import Mesh. Boom. And see that? And you see how it's intersecting now? Perfect, right? Next up, if you have a more complex character, you need to use these low underscore high suffixes. You can retype these to whatever you want, like a capital low, capital high, you know. But what we're looking for is match by mesh name. So now it's going to be going through that whole list and matching everything that does match up. Now you'll see a little error here, right? See how this one is called metal rim underscore low. This one is metal rims underscore high, plural. That's the problem, right? So we need to go back into Maya, metal rims, boom. And there you go. So now let's File, Export that selection again. Shield Fixed, Export. Let's go into Painter, Edit, Re-import, Mesh, and we should see it. Come on, Edit, Re-import Mesh, Mode, Bake Mesh Maps. There we go. So no discrepancy. See how it's under this category. It's matching them perfectly. All right. So we're ready to give this another bake. Make sure your high poly is still loaded in there in case you change the project configuration. And let's do Bake Selected Textures. Boom. There we go. Let's return to painting mode and just look around, right? Because you wanna resolve all your baking issues at this level on the normal map, because the normal map bakes out so fast. Let's go back to Bake Mesh Maps, and once that's working, check out your ambient occlusion. So I'm just gonna bake out an ambient occlusion map. Let's return to painting mode, and you can just go to the ambient occlusion channel now. Boom, you see that? So one of the issues down here is that this is kind of, we're getting this like weird shadow, so we could potentially fix that by covering it up a little bit more with that metal rim. You know, if we scale that out a little bit, push that up, you know, just cover it up a little bit, right? So that'll get rid of that. And then on these rivets as well, if you wanted those to scale to cover up that little shadowy border on them, you can do the same thing. It's gonna be a little bit harder because there's like more of them. You need to go in one by one, or you could try one of these. You could select all of them, hold W and left click, go to Axis Normal, and just kind of expand those. So it kind of just grows them a little bit. And then I'm gonna hold W, left click again, go into Axis World, and then just push those back down. And since I would really recommend doing that with your high poly showing, you know, to get a really effective match. And then you can also tweak this one a little bit inward as well, because I noticed a little bit of a shadow there. So let's try that again. File, Export, Selection, and let's do Shield Fixed, boom, boom, and then Painter, Edit, Re-import Mesh. Let's go back to Bake Mesh Maps, and then I'm gonna Bake Selected Textures, and let's return to painting mode. So that's a little bit mitigated now. Now we're getting like an inverse effect where I almost need to bring the other side up, but this border looks a lot better now, and so do the rivets themselves. It's a lot more of a contact shadow looking sort of bake there. So I'm gonna stick with this. I would recommend, if you're doing some professional work, get this to bake out really nicely. And again, it's just all about the low poly versus the high poly there. That's the only thing that's messing up there. I'm going to go back to Bake Mesh Maps, and since I know that these bakes are working, I'm going to bake out a normal, world space normal, ambient occlusion, curvature, and position. And I'm going to do it at my document size. I'm going to do it at 2048, anti-aliasing. I'm just going to do like 16x for the video, and let's just bake them all out. So bake selected textures. Now watch as it goes through each of these lists in the maps that it's baking out. And it just did world space normal and regular tangent space normal. And now it's doing ambient occlusion. Notice that it's going a lot slower this time. It's because I'm at, it's basically 4 times the size of pixel density, right? Because it was a 1024 square, now it's 2048, so it's 4 of those 1024 squares. And it's also anti-aliasing. It's going to take a little bit more time, but the results are great. You know, it gets a really smooth result, and judge it. You'll have to judge it for your own personal work. If you're doing like something that's going to bring up a camera really close, you have to make sure it holds up when you bring your camera close in here as well, right? So take that in mind to whatever project you're working on. So we have these maps. Now let's talk about the general approach with Painter. So see how I have this paint layer? It's great, fantastic. Throw it in the trash. No one needs it. Instead, we're going to be plugging in a lot of our fill layers, okay? So let's add a fill layer right here. And this is going to be for the wood, okay? So in this, I'm going to make it a dark, whoa, one second. We're going to make it a dark brown color, okay? So I'm going to do this, and I'm liking that. And why is it not showing up in my viewport? Uh-oh. There we go. All right, that was very strange. Next up, I'm gonna up the roughness, right? This is a piece of wood, and this is gonna be like the deeper colors of that wood, okay? And no metallic on this. And I'm gonna show you something that's so useful that was stumping me for a while. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this in a folder, all right? So now inside this folder that you can collapse and open up, I'm going to be adding stacks to this, and I'm just going to call this wood because this is only going to be the wood. Now what you can do is right click, add a black mask to that, and basically what that mask tells it is that it's going to only show up where it is white, right? It's going to partially show up where it's gray as well, but if I go back to material, you can see exactly what I'm talking about, right? So that's the logic behind a mask, and we're going to be using those masks with the data that we've baked out to get some really interesting details exposed, right? Because we spent a lot of time on that sculpt, right? We want those details to really ring true. We want this curvature to come out as well, right? So what I'm gonna do is go back to material, and I'm gonna do polygon fill. So polygon fill, when I have this mask selected, I'm gonna clear this mask because I don't want excuse me, let me just clear the mask right there. What this is going to do is you can fill by single polys, you can fill by triangles, or you can fill by meshes, so it's the entire mesh, or individual UV shells, and that's so good for us. So look at that. See how it immediately just got exactly all the wood, right? So next up is I'm going to add another fill layer, right? So I have this one on top of this one. That's why this one's no longer showing up. And I'm going to add a black mask to this. Boom. Now in that black mask, let's plug in a generator. Generators, all of these, they need those mesh maps to be baked out, okay? They need the mesh maps. So let's do first an ambient occlusion. Now, what we're going to really do in the future, like on your future projects, is we're going to use the mask editor rather than like the default generators, you know, because basically the mask editor contains all of the other mesh map generators that like influence the texture, right? So mask editor is just kind of the best. It has them all, and you can just bring them all in at once. But for now, I'm just going to do ambient occlusion, or it has most of them. It doesn't have all of them, but I'm going to bring in ambient occlusion, and in here, you'll notice that if I go to my mask, this mask is being driven by that ambient occlusion, okay? So if I go back to material, you'll notice that when I click on this ambient occlusion, I can change the global balance of it, and look at that. You see how I'm getting a lot of just detail in there from my sculpt. it's built into that sculpt, and it's just going to be so nice. If you're having trouble seeing like some detail like on the bottom of this shield, what you might want to do is go up to your little display settings, and then environment alignment. If you do camera, now your lighting's going to be a little bit more standardized across that model. Basically parents that skybox that it's using to light your space to your camera. But yeah, so that's looking great, but the color's wrong, right? So let's mess with the color. Let's get something a little bit warmer, a little bit oranger, and let's get some richness in there. You see that? So let's get some of that, maybe a little bit darker. And then on the ambient occlusion, let's change that global balance a little bit. And you can also change a bunch of the settings in here, like the initial balance of that ambient occlusion as well. So that's great for us. And then let's go to roughness, and I'm trying to see how much shine this guy has, and it feels a little bit too shiny. So I'm gonna up the roughness a little bit. I want a little bit of a shine, like it's a polished wood or something. But yeah, so let's do that. And I also want you guys to understand that you can go into this layer stack that you're developing, and you can right click, add something like a fill. And on this fill, you can give it access to any of your textures or anything. So you could do like crystals, you could do, sorry, my cat's being real, a real pester right now. So let's do, we could do something like directional scratches, and then if you look at your mask, boom, it's taking that. And if you change to blend mode on this, you could do something like multiply. So then it's multiplying with that initial mask right there, and it just gives it a lot of extra sort of visual fidelity in there. Okay, and if you wanted this to start actually pushing up on that surface, you could affect that height channel as well. So now you get a little bit of extra grain from that, right? I might do this separately though. Like I would recommend doing that directional scratches on a different layer, but that one's not looking too bad, you know. So so that's great. And then let's do a highlight. All right, so I'm gonna do base color. Let's do like a lighter color in here, and then I'm just gonna alt click it, so I'm only affecting that. And then I'm gonna click this, so I'm gonna affect the roughness as well. I'm gonna get this to be a little bit more rough, and then let's add a black mask, and let's plug into another generator. So I want you guys to become familiar with curvature. It basically, if I go back to my mask, boom, it looks at the convex and concave shapes of my model, and it starts modifying the surface according to that. Okay, so that's beautiful for us. What we can do with that is, if we go back to our material, you can see exactly what it's affecting. I want to really clamp down on these values though. I'm gonna go into the curvature settings, and let's just go into the mask to debug what's going on here. I'm just gonna do huge. I'm gonna crank all the large, medium, and like soft details down. I just want those like really like fine grained details in there. And then there we go. And then we could also, again, you know, add a fill and blend it with that as well, right? So if we wanted this to not be uniform across that space, we could use something like black and white spots, right? We could go into that black and white spots parameter and start like stretching it out, or making it fit our mesh a little bit better. And if we multiply that on there, it's going to give us a little bit, so it's not as even, you know. So it's not as even. That's going to be nice for us. We could even bump up the contrast on that. Let's turn off that curvature, and let's put this back to normal. We can even bump up that contrast. So now we just get streaks where we want them to be. So we get stuff like that, and then let's turn back that on, turn on that curvature, and then set it back to multiply. So now it's modifying that underlying surface, and that's gonna be cool for us. So now let's play with the colors so we can get something that pops a little bit more. So see where that's masking off. So we get that all of that for free, basically, for having gone through the process of sculpting all that, right? So I love this process for us, because it's just so it takes advantage of our sculpting. It doesn't waste our time. We can just go straight into these layers, and like it's already pretty robust with just a couple layers in there. You know, you can always add more and mess with like the stacks in here as well to give it more depth. But the idea you want is that you want your base color to have a lot of information in there. You know, you want your roughness to have a lot of information in there as well. Like maybe I could make this a little bit less rough in those grooves, and a little bit less rough in this one as well, just so it gets a little bit more of a gleam, you know. And then maybe these ones I could make that like the roughest of all, you know, so it's not reflecting much light, you know. And I think that's going to give us a good result, you know. So there's that. There's only one last there's only one last generator that I want to cover, so let's just add a generator. And I'm going to do a 3D. I'll do a couple more. So I'm going to do a 3D linear gradient, and this one looks at your position map. So if you go to position, let's also, I added that to I didn't do another fill layer, I just added it to that like a fool. So let's do another fill layer. Boom. Let's make this black. Boom. And I'm just going to only do color. So right click, I'm going to add a black mask. I'm going to right click that mask. Make sure you're adding these components to the mask. And I'm going to do add a generator. And on generator, I'm going to be doing 3D linear gradient. And again, position map. So let's go to our position map. Boom. And these are basically just, you're seeing the color representation of 3D space coordinates. And so if I do a little eyedropper, boom, I can start a nice gradient and end a gradient at a certain position. And if I go back to material, boom, you see that gradient in there? So that's pretty cool. I do like that generator for if I'm doing like a top-down sort of RPG character, like something for like Dota or League of Legends. I want to get a nice gradient over the top of them, right? So that pop of the top of the character kind of pops. You know, it's more exaggerated than the rest. So that's a 3D linear gradient. Let's add another generator. Let's do light. Light's a really useful one. If I go to mask, you can see it's basically faking lighting, right? So if you do a stylized sculpt, you could do a hand-painted style and bake in this light data just for free, right? And you get a nice like faked light to kind of start your painterly exploration on that character, right? So that's the light generator. Let's go in and let's pump this color. Boom, so you can see it a little bit better. And let's go into that mask and change like the angle. But yeah, so see how you're able to like fake a light source almost. I don't recommend this for PBR texturing because it's implied that you're gonna be lighting it from different angles, and it just doesn't hold up if you're using it like that. And then one last generator that I want to talk about. Let's see, where was it? Just the 3D distance generator. You can just change the let's go to the mask to debug. See, it's just a nice little fall off, and you can change the position of it, and that basically plugs into your position map and compares the values, you know. And you can change the contrast and stuff, so you can give it a nice gradient on there. So if I want these edges to sort of fall off like that, I could do something like that, you know. Let's invert it, and then let's make this black, you know. So I can do something like that and just fiddle around with that, fiddle around with the layer opacity, and just to draw your eye into the center of the shield a little bit more, you know. There you go. That's it. Now, with something like this, I also want to talk about, you can right click these and do a create smart material, and then you can reuse these. You will have to repaint the mask that you're using right here. However, that's not much. Like, I just clicked and made that in like 2 seconds, you know. So you can just keep tiling these materials, and as long as you have those maps baked out, all those layers are going to work, and then you can modify the color again and stuff. So fantastic workflow for this. But yeah, and then last thing that we're going to do right here is we're going to do another fill layer. Let's do metallic. So let's get the rest of the shield colored, right? So I'm going to do a darker metal here. I'm going to leave it like a gray value because if you push it too far, it starts looking like an ornament, you know, and we don't want that. And I'm just going to do another folder. I'm going to drag it into that folder. You can also just click a layer and press Control G to make one, but I'm just going to do metal. And here we go. Then I'm going to do another fill layer because that's our base. And let me add a black mask to this one real quick, to that metal folder. And in here, I'm going to start adding different components. Ooh, it looks like it's not. Oh, okay, it's just that one. All right, this will be a lot easier to see. But yeah, so I'm just adding each of these rivets in here. You can also left-click drag. You can left-click drag in the 2D viewport and the 3D viewport. So either way, you're gonna be good. And now you have a nice mask over that entire folder. Fantastic. So next up, we go in, bump up that metalness. And I like the slider color. That's pretty good. Let's right click, add a generator. Let's give it a curvature. Again, I would recommend doing the, oh, sorry, I even added the wrong thing. First, we need to add a black mask. But what I was gonna talk about was, I'd recommend getting acquainted with Mask Editor, because look at Mask Editor. It basically has, you know, a bunch of other generators in there, like ambient occlusion, curvature, world space normal, position gradient. So like it has so much, right? So you just get it right there. I just wanted to break it apart into different ones so you can kind of become acquainted with what these different parameters really mean, you know. Thickness, we don't use that much. That's just going to be for subsurface scattering mostly. I find that's like when it's useful. But yeah, so for this, let's do a little bit of curvature, and it's basically, if you click that little drop down, it's the same thing as that curvature generator itself. And I'm just going to crank down all these huge details. I only want those fine details. And then let's also up the no, I don't want brightness, that's affecting everything. I want to do opacity here to get a really harsh one like that. That's looking good. I might even, let's go in our mask to check if we're getting white values yet. We're not, right? So I'm going to go back up to the global balance of this and just push that even further. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to add a fill on top. So see that, that might be a bit too much. Let's change the contrast a little bit. Let's change this. Now it's a little bit more stylized, but what we can do is right click, add a fill. And on that fill, we could do something like, let's just do anisotropic radial, sure. Fantastic, that's great. And actually, that's not that great. It's a little bit haphazard for my tastes. I want like some fine detail, scratches or something. Let's do. Just don't be afraid to look through your little patterns and your. You can even like search in here a little bit to get some results. Like directional scratches, like, ooh, that's pretty interesting looking, that grunge. So let's do that, and then we can set that to multiply. So it's multiplying with that underneath mask, that mask editor right there. You see that? You can also do like subtract, so you can subtract it from that or something, right? And we could change the balance of this, so it's letting more of that through. But that's all it is. That's the secret to texturing. It's just layering up that noise and getting that high poly to work best for you, tweaking your layers, and you just need to use your artist's eye to judge like if it's what you want in each of these objects. And there you go. So that's how you texture up a shield. And then if you are in my class, I really want you guys to also add a let's add another fill layer. And let's paint on some runes to this, right? So I'm gonna paint, it's adding a fill layer. I'm gonna add a black mask. And then on that mask, please paint some cool like runes or something, right? So if you go in here, you could, because it's like kind of like a Viking shield, I'd recommend getting out the stylus and sort of like painting whatever you want in here. And crafting just something like this, and let's get that to be affected as well by those layers, right? So if I right click, add a generator on here, let's do another curvature, right? And on that, let's just control the fall off a little bit and make it a little bit sharp in there. There we go. And let's set it to multiply. Boom. So now it's multiplying with that paint that we put on that fill layer. I also like to, instead of painting directly on that mask, I like to add a paint layer so I can at least like visualize it in this stack a little bit better, right? But there you go. So do some runes, do a radial one, and you'll get some nice looking shields, you know? So that's it for baking maps and kind of how we attack Substance Painter and how we can paint a lot of really nice detail on models in here. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy Substance Painter.